Hi, Jagoan Energy. It's been a while. Welcome back again on the Energy Drink podcast by PYC, where we discuss the hot issue in the energy sector. I'm Budi, researcher at the Purnama Yusgentar Center. This episode is very special because this is the first episode of this year's seasons. We also have a very special guest here as well, a professor from the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. In this episode, we're going to hear about the just transition, what is just transition, and why we do have to talk or know about it. I can say that just transition is still niche topic in Indonesia, and it is such an honor for us today because we have Professor Raphael Heffron here as our guest today. So good morning, Professor Heffron.
Morning.
Yeah,
I'm delighted to be here.
it is such an honor for us as well to have you here. The last time, I believe that this is the first time for you to be in our podcast, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
correct.
but the last time you already shared some insights about, especially in the oil and gas panel in during our PYC International Energy Conference back in October last year.
Yes,
Yeah,
correct.
but before we really start the discussion, I would like to share with the audience, like, who are you actually? Maybe some of them already knew who you are, but I want to give them a short bio of you. So, Professor Raphael Heffron is Dean of the Faculty of Law at the University of West Indies, St. Augustine, Trinidad and Tobago, and also Professor in Global Energy Law and Sustainability. He is also Jean Monnet Professor in the Just Transition to Low Carbon Economy, awarded by the European Commission for 2019 till 2022. In 2020, he was also appointed as Senior Counsel at Johnson Law Firm in Brussels, Belgium. Regarding his publication, he has over 170 publications and is the most cited scholar in his field worldwide, with more than 1,750 scholars with translated work in multiple languages, including Chinese, Italian, and Persian. Professor Heffron has given just over 160 keynote or guest lecture in 51 countries worldwide. And recent research in 2021 includes a publication in the world leading journal, Nature Energy. His work all has a principal focus on achieving a sustainable and just transition to low carbon economy and combines a mix of law, policy, and economics. And of course, he is a go-to expert when it comes to just transition. So without further ado, let's just start with our very first basic question, like what is just transition? But maybe you can emphasize more on the brief history of the term just transition itself and what are the key concepts and mechanisms of a just transition. Please, Professor Heffron.
Thank you. Well, a just transition came around initially when it was mentioned in terms of jobs. And really, it thought about jobs as society began to face different technological challenges. So as these technological challenges were on the rise, it meant some jobs were reduced and people had to be transferred from those jobs to other jobs. And this really developed in a more broader way then, where people began to link this issue with the, let's say broadly, the energy and climate change, environmental sustainability issues in our society. So people began to think about this as a pathway of around economic growth. And the aim of economic growth was to create a more sustainable and more low carbon economy. So we began to think about trying to transition society to this low carbon economy in a just way. So by just, we're talking about fairness, more equitable solutions. We're talking about inclusiveness. So ensuring that in this process, we do not leave anyone behind, that when we move to that low carbon economy that meets our goals, our climate change goals, our energy goals, our environmental goals, our sustainability goals, we are all trying to work on this together. And that's really what the just transition means. It's that the new direction for targeting economic growth, and doing so in a just way, that just transition, and making sure that no one in society is going to be left behind in this transition to a low carbon economy.
Yeah, great. So you already mentioned that we're trying, or the global are trying to move to more sustainable way economic, and you already mentioned as well about climate, energy, and environment as goals as well for in a global level. So could you elaborate more on how goals that the UN already have mentioned before, and also in the energy sector, and especially for the climate change?
Yeah, so what really made the just transition issue take off, what made it become extremely popular, was it was mentioned in the Paris Agreement of 2015. The UN-backed Paris Agreement, signed by 197 countries and ratified by, I think, near 197. And in the same year, you also had the development and agreement by many countries of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, those 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And it was really those two, let's call them two international agreements that all countries signed up. And just to highlight the real issue here, many times when you have international countries sign up to, you have countries sign up to international agreements, you will only have maybe 40 to 60 countries sign up. So that's why these agreements were big news. 197 sign up, nearly 3 times the amount. And that provided huge impetus and speed for, let's say, many industries to respond, that they really knew then that they needed to begin acting on these issues. So when we talk about this issue of a just transition, what we're really saying, we're capturing issues within climate change, we're capturing issues within environmental impacts from our daily lives, and we're also capturing energy issues. Remember, energy is one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gases which cause climate change. You have in particular methane, and also the big one, carbon dioxide. And energy, what we extract in terms of energy is responsible for nearly 2/3 to 80% of those greenhouse gases. So solving the energy problem in terms of greenhouse gases will go a long way to solving environment and climate change problems. So really, the term just transition converges all these issues together, and it says to the public, it says to the stakeholder, it says to the politicians, we need to be working on all these issues together. We should not see these issues in isolation. They are all interlinked. And if we can work on all these together, we can then achieve a just transition to a low carbon economy.
Great. You also mentioned that the just transition were mentioned during the Paris Agreement, where almost 200 countries ratified and signed the agreement. So actually how critical is to ensure just transition for a country itself?
Well, it's absolutely critical for the health of a country in the future. Every country has their own problems, their own financial issues, particularly after COVID-19. Every country has sustainability challenges, environmental challenges, climate challenges, energy challenges. But what we need to be doing is working towards that just transition. We need to show how are we going to try and achieve this in the year 2030? How will we do it for 2040 or 2050? Indonesia, I believe, has a net zero plan for 2060. But it's about how is it going to achieve these plans in a just transition way, a just transition approach, where you are dealing with all of these issues at the same time, and you're ensuring that your society is healthy, you're ensuring that it's open for investment. And remember, internationally and even nationally, the big issue for a country here is people will view a country that is not working towards a just transition. They will view it as being a more risky country for investment. So when we're thinking about making investment choices in industries, nationally or internationally, these financiers will be asking the question, is this country on track? Is it on target for its just transition? Does it have just transition policies? Is it going to be a safe place to invest? And we have to remember, in today's global economy, financiers have much more options where to invest their money. If your country is not showing that it is responding to the increased risks within a just transition, around those increased risks around energy, where are you getting your energy from, environment, where are those big impacts, how do they affect people in a country, how is climate change affecting things? And we can even think in terms of Indonesia, the relocation of the capital city of Jakarta. I mean, that's a huge risk, and international investors will be considering, how is Indonesia going to deal with these just transition risks to other parts of the country, not just Jakarta. So huge challenges ahead, and that's why just transition is critical for a country. And we can take many other countries. I'm speaking to you from Trinidad, which is also an island nation. But again, we can think of countries like India, China, big challenges with huge populations, and how they can achieve a just transition to a low carbon economy.
Maybe you could tell us more, like you already mentioned that how critical just transition for a country, maybe progressive, as you mentioned, that it is important for a country to see how's the country progressing toward the just transition, and it will affect the investment to develop their countries. Like, how is the just transition progressing globally actually? And what about in the developing countries itself, as you already mentioned, Indonesia, India, and Trinidad before?
Yeah, so I mean, things are, I mean, let's say in many countries, whether developed or developing, the just transition is emerging. It's not fully developed yet, but countries are making progress. And let's say here in Trinidad, the government already has produced a policy document on the just transition. And in many other countries, including developing countries, India is doing a lot of work, in particular led by NGOs in India. A lot of work has been done and written on the just transition. And we are slowly seeing more and more in developing countries. South Africa is another example. And there's a couple of other countries in South America who are developing different types of just transition policies. But increasingly, you are seeing it also mentioned and being produced in certain documents in other countries in Southeast Asia. So it is something that is coming really to the fore. It's in particular over the last couple of years, the last 2 to 3 years, it is rising, and people are discussing this really in terms of policy. And then after policy is about introducing legislation. And then that legislation, if you like, that changes the rules of the game for business. So business have to respond because that is now the legislation in that particular country.
Sorry. So that's really interesting point where the legislation have quite a significant role in this to start the just transition for a country. But before we going into that topics, I want you already mentioned that big population is one of the challenges in just transition. Is there any challenges for a country to accelerate a just transition in their country, or maybe in global perspective, or and is there any opportunities for a country or at a global point of view to accelerate just transition together?
Yeah, I mean, there are great opportunities, I believe, for accelerating a just transition. I think encouraging companies in your country to innovate and be more innovative in response to a just transition. I think that's a key, should be a key aim of countries, that innovation can provide lots of opportunity, not just internally in the country, but potentially also externally in terms of exporting different types of goods, that, you know, different types of goods that are more sustainable, you know, that are produced by green energy. And that is definitely where opportunities lie. I think too often people see we have to respond to the just transition, or maybe in the past you may have heard, oh, we have to respond to climate change. And too often they see it as a cost. You know, this is going to cost the economy money. Well, actually, recent research now shows it should not cost you actual money. The greater cost will be from doing nothing. And if you respond quickly to a international policy like the just transition, it should actually give you more opportunity. However, the challenge, and it'll give you more opportunity in terms of economic growth, more opportunity in terms of the creation of jobs, and more opportunity in terms of creating different types of products where your economy no longer has to rely on what it did in the past, such as maybe perhaps oil, gas, coal, for example. And it can move away from that and become a more international and global economy. But some of the challenges to achieving that, there are probably two key challenges that I would see. The first one is, within a country, there needs to be more communication between different institutions. So you need more communication in these areas that I've been talking about, around energy, around environment, around climate change, around sustainability, around the economy, around finance. And too often, these ministries, let's say at government level, too often they aren't working together. And that's why some countries have taken it a step further by creating these cross government department units. And, you know, essentially it will be like a just transition unit where different members of different ministries would be part of that, so that there could be greater coordination so as to deliver greater impact within that society. So that would be the first major challenge for me. The second big challenge would be for developing countries. I think they need more support from the developed world. They need to get the promised, let's say, climate finance or sustainability finance. They need that, you know, extra finance to help support this transition, and not just to support it, but to help accelerate this just transition. And I think if the developed world were more responsible in terms of their own, let's say, past pollution records, that they should be contributing to developing countries and their aims of accelerating a just transition to a low carbon economy in these countries. So to me, they are they'd be two of the big challenges, but at the same time, the opportunities increasingly are there. And the more countries that are working directly on the just transition, we are seeing more positive economic benefits.
Yeah, great, Peter. So basically, a country should respond quickly to so that it will give the country itself like more opportunities in jobs, in economics, and uh, to move away from fossil fuels, maybe. Yeah. So as you already mentioned before, that all of that can be started with a policy. So it will be started with the legislation. How do stakeholders and government take roles to contribute to achieving the just transition? You already mentioned that the government should work together in multi-sectoral, multidisciplinary, and could you emphasize on that?
Yeah. So I mean, part of the challenge here is, you know, what we're trying to do is transition our economies away from the way they were structured before. So exactly as you said it there, you don't maybe want to be relying on fossil fuels so much. And let's take it very, very simplistically. You know, if you had a small amount of money to invest, you don't go out and invest everything in the same, you know, on the same source. You don't invest everything in, for example, one of these cryptocurrencies. You would make an investment across a different range of investment products. So what you will be asking your government is, why for so long have you not made investments across a whole range of products? Why do we still rely on the same two or three energy resources for nearly our entire, to keep our economy stable? And that's the challenge we're really saying here, is a just transition to a low carbon economy. First of all, we want to move away from relying on the old way of thinking in terms of our economic security. The second thing is, we realize there's new technologies now. There's finally new technologies available. And you think about the use of coal. There's been barely any innovation in coal use for nearly 200 years. We burn it the same way. We still can't deal with all the chemicals that come off coal. But we do have this new technology around. And again, if I bring it back to you simplistically and I say to you, I don't know what type of mobile phone you have. Is it a Samsung, a smartphone?
A smartphone, yeah.
Yeah. So if I said to you, will you go back and use a phone from 15 years ago? And the phone from 15 years ago will probably be, this size, this thick.
That would be very big and yeah,
Yeah. And
not
you'd
so
be
mobile.
carrying it. Yeah, exactly. So I would say to you, why aren't we putting the same pressure on the energy sector to say, where's the innovation? Why haven't you made this a clean energy source after nearly 200 years? And we should be asking these questions to say, we need more of this new technology. We need to diversify the investment portfolio of a country. And I think that's where the government needs to come in and say, okay, it's time. We need to think about this transition to a low carbon economy. We need to take action. We need to make sure the economy is more resilient, more sustainable. And the way we'll do that is by diversifying what we rely on to build the economy, what we sell, what we export, and all this will ensure many, many benefits across climate, environment, energy sector, sustainability, the health sector, and will contribute to more sustainable economic growth.
Yeah, so basically just transition will give it will affect a lot of sectors, like from health, energy, and economic as well.
Exactly. I mean, just consider if you're thinking about how the just transition can improve it can lessen environmental impact, increase our responses to climate change, move us using from old types of energy use to new types of energy use. All that will have huge benefits. I mean, as an economy, we would use less energy, we'd become more energy efficient, we'd use cleaner energy. As a result of cleaner energy use, we would have greater impacts on public health, because less of us would go to hospital for different reasons. If less people go to hospital, that saves money for the entire economy that can be spent on other issues such as social housing, such as improving the environment, etc., etc. The list goes on. So that's how the just transition circle works. I mean, you're doing positive actions, and some of these positive actions are going to save the economy money in different ways, and you can reallocate that money to improve the economy and society even further.
Yeah, is there any, or could you recommend best practice from other countries relevant to a just transition in the context of energy transition and climate change mitigations or adaptation efforts for Indonesia, maybe?
Well, hopefully some of you can read more of this best practice in my recent short book published at the end of 2021, which I believe PYC now have a copy online, a ebook in your library. So hopefully some of your PYC members or affiliated members will be able to access it via your own library. But just to say, in terms of best practices, there are different best practices emerging all over the world. This is a very, very fast growing sector, and it's a great place for people to do some research, because the change is happening fast, that you can select 4 or 5 countries on a particular issue and say, okay, what are these best practice changes from a just transition? So, I mentioned one thing before, but it's worth repeating about these in terms of government actions and how different governments were setting up these just transition units that would work across the different ministries. That is one example of best practice, because what it does is, when you have that type of coordinated thinking, it says to investors, this government is serious, they want to change. So to give you an example, if you were thinking about reforming industry, for example, in your country, and you were saying, how do we get different industries, maybe such as clothing, which is very big in your country, or you said the food industry, again, which is very big, and you said, the food industry needs to improve their packaging, sustainable packaging. They need to use less energy. The clothing industry needs to use less energy, needs to reduce its environmental impact. But if these things are done in a coordinated way, where instead of 2, 3, 4 different ministries or government agencies, regulators talking to these firms, you actually just have one just transition unit saying, we want to see what you are doing as an industry on all these different issues. So what it does is it ensures that all companies within that industry are responding, rather than 20 companies within that industry all responding to 4 or 5 different ministries in very different ways. So what you're doing is you're putting lots of policy reform together, and you're saying to these companies, now give us an overview of what you are doing and how you are going to respond to this just transition to a low carbon economy. And that includes those issues for, an island nation such as yourselves in terms of adaptation? What are you doing to ensure that, let's say, we are adapting to the effects of climate change? What are you doing to mitigate against climate change? How are you reducing your carbon footprint? How are you reducing your environmental impacts? And then, as I said, in terms of the energy transition, how are you using energy more efficiently? And are you using low carbon energy? I mean, we have to think of the scope in your country for offshore wind or solar energy, that is utilized, rooftop solar or different types of solar that is utilized by industry. There is huge potential, and you can already see the success of solar energy in India. I think over the last 8 years in India, they have reduced the cost of solar energy by something like 66%. Huge reduction. And remember, that's despite India purchasing the solar panels from abroad. So a lot of the price drop has become through because of the technological expertise. People are learning. And that fits in with what I was telling you earlier about innovation. It's not just about innovation in a product, it's also about innovation in terms of how we do work and improving techniques, improving, different regulations so people are able to switch into different jobs, move from oil and gas to, let's say, solar energy installation, offshore wind. So there are huge possibilities. And I think a lot of stories are emerging of best practice. And for those who are in policy positions, the Just Transition had several sessions, formally and also in terms of ones created by NGOs at the last COP26 conference. And again, you get to see different examples of best practices if you look up that information from those COP26 sessions.
All right. So unfortunately, Professor Heffron, that was the last question from us. So what we can learn here that just transition really a huge thing for us to can achieve the climate change goals, the environment goals, the energy goals as well. And there will be a challenge, especially in how the government or how this multi-stakeholders to collaborate in multi-sectoral way, and there will be a challenge for the developing country, especially in the finance, to realize the just transition in their country. And the government should respond quickly and being innovative in how they're working on how they're doing the business as usual. So, but before we really end this discussion, we want to know, like, what are you looking forward to in the future? And maybe you could share with us, like, what is your dreams and how the sector might evolve moving forwards.
Well, let's say I think if we're thinking about dreams, what we should be thinking about is this challenge of a just transition to a low carbon economy. It's probably the challenge. It's probably the biggest societal challenge of our lifetimes. So if you were to ask me about the dream, what I would say is, first of all, we need governments to introduce policy and legislation for society on this just transition. Second, what we need is a lot more research. And thirdly, is what we need to start reaching out to children and trying to educate them on a just transition to a low carbon economy. And that, by that, I mean, educating children from the years 4 to the years, throughout their school years till they're 18, and creating content on the just transition that they can understand, so that when they go off to university, they will be able to, make those challenges and bring about that technology revolution that we need to accelerate the just transition to a low carbon economy.
Yeah, super. Thank you so much, Professor Heffron, for joining us today. And it has been a great session. Also, thank you to Jaguan Energy who have joined in our discussion with Professor Heffron today. I hope you have a better understanding of just transition and why we need to talk about it. And of course, contributing to accelerating the just transition in our country and globally. For further literature, as already mentioned by Professor Heffron has launched a new book titled Achieving a Just Transition to a Low Carbon Economy. It can be accessed through, or you can buy it on Amazon or Springer, depending on your institutions. And if you enjoy and learning something from this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and also our Spotify. If you ha- if you have any suggestion on future topics or future guests on our podcast, please leave a comment on our YouTube channel. In addition, PYC also holding a paper competition with a theme of energy security for sustainable future. So if you have any ideas, insights, or innovations, because it is important for us, for the country to accelerate the just transition and also energy security, you can share it with our teams through our email through papercompetition@pyccenter.org before February 13, 2022, or about 2 weeks from now. And PYC also have a weekly podcast, which is Energy 24/7. And we hope our podcast can accompany you anywhere and be productive. For further information, don't forget to visit our website at purnamusikantorcenter.org. And thank you so much and have a nice day and see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.